We call a meeting of the Facilities and Operations Committee to order. We have a full agenda tonight, or this afternoon, and we're going to start off with Dan.
Okay. Would you like to do a round of introductions? He's gone.
Yes.
But I think he's yes.
Oh, there he is.
Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer.
Marina Cresswell, Senior Director of the Office of School Modernization.
Diana White, Director of Planning and Real Estate. Lydia Neal, Director of Construction and Project Management.
Issa Taylor, the alternate DSC representative for Adam Grove High School.
Awesome, welcome. Gary Hollins, Board Chair of the PPS School Board and Facilities Operations Committee.
Natasha Garcia, Project Manager, Office of Operations.
That's right.
That's right.
So you want
You guys can introduce yourself.
Virginia LaPorte, I'm preparing for public comment.
Stephanie Antoine for public comment.
Jane Cabranos here for support for public comment.
All right.
Karen Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
All right. That's everybody.
Project Communications.
Board members. Director Green.
Eddie Wong.
Director Wong.
Yep.
Director
Committee member,
Julia
board.
Brum Edwards. Sorry.
No worries. Go for it.
Julia Brum Edwards, board member, committee member.
Herman Green, board member, community member.
All right.
Go back behind us.
Yeah.
Eric Girding, Senior Project Manager, Office of School Modernization.
Kirsten Cowden, Real Estate Manager.
Sean Sayo, Senior Project Manager, OSM.
Is that everyone?
So,
All right. Let's go. Let's go. So first up, we're still gonna be out here by 6. So
Absolutely.
we're gonna
I just apologize for my lateness. It's been quite hectic this last few days for me.
we're gonna pick up time.
Yes.
Jump right in. So first topic is Roosevelt grandstands. In the materials in the board packet is a staff memo. I'll just do a real quick kind of hit the highlights, and then we can move into discussion. So at Roosevelt High School, the existing grandstands have a capacity of about 800 persons. As requested, staff have looked into the request to increase the capacity of the grandstands to 2,300, which should be 1,500 on the home side and 800 on the visitor side, plus the addition of new storage facilities. This project would require design, land use permitting, and of course construction. And the total cost is roughly $3.5 to $4 billion as scoped. As the memo notes, capital funds, both bond and non-bond, are limited, and PPS's capital needs are expansive. The district's deferred maintenance backlog, just in and of itself, which is basically fixing broken things, exceeds $1 billion. The largest immediately available source of funds for capital projects is the 2017 bond program savings. As the 2017 bond program nears completion, projects and program savings become available for other eligible uses. Savings can be allocated to projects that meet bond compensatory requirements. What that means is generally bond funds can be used for a variety of capital projects. However, prior to allocating bond funds to any scope of work that's not explicit in the bond language would need to be reviewed with bond counsel. Recommendation, kind of getting to the upshot, considering the condition of PPS's facilities and the limited availability of funding to address deferred maintenance and other existing building condition needs, staff recommends that the future improvements of Roosevelt grandstands be considered during development of general obligation bond planning, and that the savings that is available from 2017 bond be used for existing conditions. With that, we're happy to answer questions.
So are we talking about not doing the stands? Can we bottom line it? Are we talking about not doing it and saving it for later?
Yeah, To move forward with constructing the grandstands would require allocation of resources, both staff resources and funding. And so so the question of course would be where the funding comes from. What we're recommending is that be considered as part of general obligation bond planning.
So are we doing them or not?
The recommended, so currently, no, there is no current action moving towards them. If there is direction to proceed with them, the funds would need to be identified. And the board, for example, could direct the superintendent to use any sort of funds, general fund, for example, or other capital funds. What staff is recommending is considering these improvements as a part of the bond planning effort that's going on. If the board decides that that scope of work should be in the bond and that bond is subsequently successful, then the project would proceed forward.
So we need to do the Roosevelt grandstands. Why is it that Roosevelt is one of the only schools in the district with the trashiest stands? They don't have visitor stands. Nobody wants to be over there. So to simply say, if we should decide to do it, that's dumb talk to me. Like we need to do it. It needs to get done. We should have done it back then. We should have redone the bleachers. We didn't get the bleachers that we were supposed to get. They were one of the only schools that had to pay for their stuff on their own. Everybody else got bond money and all this other money, as where the investments that Roosevelt put into getting their bleachers done. A lot of other schools did not have to jump through those same hoops. And once again, we are forcing Roosevelt to just sit down and eat what they got and be quiet. And I'm not okay with that. We need to get it done. So who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to convince to say we need to do this? Because to simply say staff wants to, we think we need to defer it. I don't really know. Stop. We need to get this done. So
Director Green, I think what we have before us is staff has made a recommendation, and obviously the committee can take an action. We can either follow the recommendation or you could make another motion. But that would be the process. So staff is just coming with a recommendation and materials.
I have a question. So when Roosevelt was done, was the grandstands initially part of that packet?
No, so the grandstands were not a part of the modernization.
Okay. I'm just curious why not? Was it?
I don't know if there's the most, linear answer to that, and I don't have total purview. What I do, and so I couldn't go through that project and say when scopes in and scopes out directly. What I do know is when the 2012 bond passed, which Roosevelt was a part of, as well as Franklin Grant, prior to the bond passing, the district had specs for high school were, I think, about 220,000 square feet. After the bond passed, that was increased. The capacity of the high schools was also increased. And so I think for those high schools, that was increased to roughly 285,000 square feet, substantially, a quarter of the size larger. But no additional funds are made available to the bond program. There were some bond program contingency that were able to provide those projects, but not that much. So those three projects had to look for ways to cut scope to live within their means. And some of those decisions were athletics, with the idea being athletics are scopes of work when you do large projects that can be added later, where some scopes of work can't, like making every classroom 10% bigger after it's done, things like that. So that's, I think, part of the answer, but I don't want to imply that that's, the entire.
I can also provide. I can also provide some additional context. So I wasn't on the board in 2012, but I was contacted at the time by Franklin parents who part of the rescoping that or value engineering that Dan was talking about was going to be the value engineering of essentially installing the pegs, but not the seatings in the Franklin stands, and ultimately, because of conversations with the school community, they completed the stadium, and I believe the trade-off was they were told that if they wanted a brick exterior to their performing arts center, they would need to pay for that, like upgrade the materials versus getting a lower grade material, and they raised the funds to do that. So it became a trade-off, but Franklin, which was done around the same time, did have, I don't know what the seating is at Franklin, but it's pretty ample, and was upgraded at the same time that the Roosevelt project was happening.
And Roosevelt didn't get those kind of options because Roosevelt had to pay for their track and field on their own.
I was part of that.
They got some help from Nike, and Nike put in the last part of it, but Roosevelt didn't get any of that, and they weren't given the offer to have any of that. And then when it came down to it, and we was like, this isn't going to work, we ended up having to take the stands, the current stands that are at the Roosevelt football stadium are actually the stands that were supposed to be used on the baseball side, and they got moved over. So it was never adequate. And the same time, and Dan can go back and check the paperwork, when they were talking about the bond, they were saying that Roosevelt was never going to make it to 1,700 students. They would never even make it to 1,200 or 1,300 students, because over on the east side is where they were going to build the additional building with the additional in a future bond, should Roosevelt need to get up to scope and come up to the 1,700. And so they were going to build on the east side the additional building, and that's when they would also because if it ever got there, that they would figure out a way to do something, possibly figure out a way to do something with the bleachers, move the bleachers back. And then it was like, well, it's okay, you've got enough seats. And it just became this dialogue of, it's okay, you have enough, it's okay, you have enough. And I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with us telling the community, telling the Roosevelt community consistently, be happy with what you got, or you go out and raise the money, because we're not telling any other school in our district to do that. No other school is going to have a trashy stadium with the exception of Roosevelt. If we go around the district and we look at every other school within the district that's getting redone, they're all going to have a phenomenal stadium, a phenomenal school, with the exception of Roosevelt. And we keep telling Roosevelt, sit down, be quiet, and eat it. And that's not okay. Find the money and let's fix the stadium. I don't see why we're having this discussion. So I don't know how to do it. Like, do I say, is it something that I got to submit? Do I got to submit a resolution? Do I got to write a resolution? Do I got to find 3 more people to sign off so that we can give direction? Tell me what I got to do so I can get it done, because this is a trash conversation.
So,
Director Green, you could make a motion to recommend to the full board. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. You have the option to make a resolution that we can send to the full board, to have the superintendent direct staff to start that process.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we draft a resolution that we send this to the full board, and so that we can get the superintendent to direct the staff.
So do we have a
Second that.
No, Eddie.
I have a friendly amendment.
Hold on. The director, Eddie Wong, has seconded a motion. Sorry, motion and second. I motion, he can second. Go ahead, Director Brim-Edwards.
I was going to make a friendly amendment that we should ask bond counsel to review it to make sure that it fits within the scope of the language. My recollection.
Okay, I'm gonna try to go into Primera's mind and see what she. Oh, here she comes. I don't have to do that.
I'm back. Sorry about that. I was just gonna ask for also, and this, I don't know if this needs to be an amendment, but that we also need to ask bond counsel that just clear that it would be an appropriate use of the bond funds or within the scope. My recollection is the language is fairly broad, and that this should fit into the overall language that we've included. But we should do that because you need to make sure that you're spending bond, if that's the funding that would be used, that we're using bond funds appropriately.
Yeah. Also, too, I want to ask a question around that. So I'm curious on how much leftover bond funds we have from the bonds that, I mean, in general, how much do we have left over from the savings of whatever bonds that we're going to be using or could use?
So the 217 bond program is nearing completion, it's not all the way done. And so we know we're expecting about 17 million returning from savings from Lincoln High School. That'll be the bulk of it. There could be some more, but that'll be the bulk of it. 10 million of that has already been earmarked to go towards improvements, building improvements that are part of an agreement we have with the city and with the city around their PSEF funds, about improvements to building conditions, HVAC temperature improvements. Julia might jump in here because she probably has more details than I do, or at least nothing else, a better recall.
Like I said, that's part of the dollar agreement, and they gave 10, they gave more, but we give 10, they give 10.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And so that leaves 7 from this pot of money, for lack of a better term. We expect to have some more, but with the projects not completed yet, we're not ready to say more than that. So that's the amount that was noted in the memo.
Gotcha.
Sorry, Julia, did you want to say something as I trampled over the PSEF conversation?
No, I think you captured it correctly. The agreement was 20 million, and there's an identified process laid out by how it would be spent, but primarily also based on school staff, in consultation with school staff. But 10 was from PSEF that we already have been granted from the city, and 10 from the bond funds.
Okay, so it sounds like it was motion and seconded. So what we need to do is
With the friendly amendment.
Well, the friendly amendment was to check with bond counsel.
Yes.
Make sure that the funds are being used according to the letter of the bond. So this is what we'll do is we will write a resolution. We'll bring it here at the next F&O meeting, and then we can vote it out of committee to the full board. So we can do that and then just move forward and go from there on that.
Perfect. Works for me.
Questions, comments, thoughts? Anybody? I mean, I'm okay if you guys have, outside of the memo, any other thoughts, comments? Nothing? No? If the idea is not a good idea, nothing, just.
I think Dan said it all.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I want to reiterate that we have a significant amount of deferred maintenance that needs to occur on our schools. And so I think the context of the staff recommendation is really to say, we think that deferred maintenance should be a priority over new assets. That is why the recommendation is what it is. That's all it is. It's a recommendation.
Yeah.
Right?
Gotcha. All right, any other questions, comments, thoughts around the Roosevelt High School grandstands?
Can public make comment or ask a question?
No, we're not in public comment section yet. All right. Are you
Director Hollins, if we're just for, like maybe a point of order or a question about a point of order. So we are actually voting on that now. We're just going to bring it back, even though we had a
Going in
first
and
and
out.
second. I assume now we're just going to lay that. I was just saying we had a first and a second. I'm assuming we're not voting on it. We're just laying it over till the next committee meeting. And because if we were actually voting on it, then there would be normally public comment, but it sounds like instead of voting on it today, we're going to bring it back next
At the next
at the next committee meeting.
Yeah, so we're gonna
Okay.
table it. We're gonna table the motion right now, so that way we can get a thought out resolution to actually submit to the board, and then we'll vote on it at the next F&O meeting to refer it to the full board.
And I'm cool with that.
All right, no other further questions? Let's go to Grant Bowl.
Topic 2, Grant Bowl. Also in the packets is a staff memo. I'll do some quick highlights and in discussion. As everyone here probably knows, the Grant Bowl synthetic turf field is being replaced right now. It'd probably be done if it wasn't for terrible weather over the last week, but very close. And the track is planned to be resurfaced in summer, in between spring and fall sports. We're also very close to having a lease agreement with Parks. That should be coming to the board very soon in the next, I don't know if it's going to make the next meeting, right? Be the meeting after that.
Okay.
When PPS was considering a new location for the Grant softball field several years ago, the district completed a conceptual master plan that included the upper field where softball is today, as well as the Grant Bowl. That master plan contemplated in the Grant Bowl additional improvements such as field lighting, grandstands, concessions, press box storage, and perimeter fencing. This is kind of colloquially known as phase 2. The total estimated amount for that work in 2020 dollars was approximately $11 million. That also included the track and field, so a little bit less, take some of that scope out of there. Certainly to meet current ed specs, the Grant Bowl, which is obviously the primary track and field for Grant, would need these improvements completed. That said, cutting to the chase, very similar to the previous conversation, considering the district's existing conditions and facility needs, staff recommends that current available funds be allocated to deferred maintenance of existing facilities and improvements for Grant Bowl Phase 2 be considered along with other improvements for future general obligation bond planning.
Okay, so I know we have some folks here from Grant, so I'm going to let them give their public comment while we're on this topic, if that's okay with everyone. All right. Kara, would you call up public comments?
Yes. Stephanie Antipov, Virginia LaForte. Everybody, if you don't know me, I'm Stephanie Antipov. You've probably seen me around for Grant stuff. Actually prepared a written statement just so I cover everything, so I'm just going to read it off. I do want to first acknowledge and thank the school district for ensuring that Grant High School football field was replaced and ready for spring sports. This is an important step in getting our student athletes back in our classrooms. While it was an important first step, today I want to address the impact of Phase 2. This project isn't prioritized and completed yet. At first, I signed up to share my own family's experience with the impact on my son's grades my son is experiencing by missing the same class twice a week just to play football this fall, JV and varsity. Due to my role as the Grant Football Booster President, I also have insight into the larger impact caused by the missed educational hours. So I'm here as an advocate, not only for my family, but for the entire Grant football community. This semester, there have been countless athletes who have struggled to gain missed knowledge, retake tests due to missing 4+ hours a week on the same class every week, completing missed homework, all while keeping their day-to-day grades afloat. Many of these athletes have struggled so much, including my own son, they have gave up and started to avoid and skip class due to the pressures. Missing this time was not only bad for their grades, it was bad for their mental health. To help paint a picture, I want to share some stats. Just the football team alone missed over 1,000 educational hours this fall. Don't even get me started on how many hours our soccer team missed due to the missing class for practices and games. On average, JV players lost 4 hours of homework time just for their home games, while they shouldn't have lost any. The average time our varsity players got back to Grant High School from their home games was 10:30 to 11 p.m. at night. This impacted a significant amount of our families who worked night shifts and had to figure out how to get their kids picked up because public transportation isn't safe at that hour. You might ask me how these stats are still applicable given that the field's fixed. Replacing the field does not improve any of these stats for next year or the years after that. The only thing that will improve the above numbers is if the field gets lights due to how early it sunsets in Portland. Let me be clear, missing educational hours due to student athletes not being provided proper facilities is unacceptable. This afternoon, I was informed the official recommendation of this committee is to hold on further improvements to the Grant Bowl, including the lights, to ensure that maintenance of the existing facilities is prioritized for the 2017 bond funds. After reading through the various projects, after reading through the various projects, the Grant High School Bowl is the only project that directly impacts educational hours. While I agree maintenance of existing infrastructure is important, these projects do not impact if a student graduates or not. Missing a significant amount of your high school instructional time does. In a district that has some of the lowest graduation rates in the state, it's essential that the school district shows student athletes that their education matters by allocating funds to support projects that directly correlate to their educational hours. Our students deserve better from everyone in this room, and it's your time to act now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait to be called on.
Go ahead.
So I'm Virginia LaForte. I'm a Grant High School parent and co-founder of the Grant Bowl Community Coalition. As most of you are probably aware, we've been advocating relentlessly and now successfully for Portland Parks and Rec to turn over control of the Grant Bowl to PPS. So its potential for Grant students and the community can be fully realized under the day-to-day control of PPS. So as the final lease is currently being reviewed by the City of Portland, I'm here today on behalf of the coalition to discuss phase 2 of advocacy regarding the bowl. It's our understanding at this point, PPS staff has recommended that further improvements to the bowl be part of future bond planning, even though Lincoln High School's build out came in $17 million under budget. This funding would be used, or the recommendation is that it would be used for urgent deferred maintenance issues at other schools. And I do want to speak personally for a moment. I'm deeply familiar with PPS's deferred maintenance backlog, having initiated advocacy for 2 multi-million-dollar maintenance projects, including base paint stabilization at all schools and the $38 million air filtration system that's on top of Coventry School. So we fully support prioritizing the urgent maintenance needs, there's no question. But what the coalition doesn't support is delaying specifically the installation of the lights at the Grant Bowl for a minute longer. We're urgently looking for solutions that allow us to address deferred maintenance and, in Grant's case, deferred construction, has been deferred for, let's say, 75 years to be conservative. And we think we have a solution. Most recently, when the upper field was installed next to the Grant Bowl, the light poles were installed for that upper field. And those poles also are positioned to point directly at the bowl. So in essence, the project has already been started. And moving forward immediately with the installation of the remaining poles and positioning lights on all of them would extend the hours of the bowl in the immediate future. This will not only allow students to stay on site for practices and address the issues that Stephanie discussed, but it will also extend the available permitting hours for PPS to other community groups. So it's also our understanding that the vendor that did install the poles to the for the upper field provides financing over 10 years. And with the new lease in place, PPS is actually set to retain the permitting fees for the bowl. We are asking that PPS allocate the revenue from the permitting fees, specifically from the bowl, for the installation of lights this spring and summer. It's long overdue. We spoke to the architects ourselves months ago to see if installing these poles would screw up any future improvements to the bowl, and they said no. We work on existing things all the time. So in closing, I'd like to say we definitely relate to Director Green's comments of the PPS telling the Roosevelt community, you're okay, you have enough. Every other high school has stadiums, but I think we really need to remind everybody that we do not have a stadium at Grant. We do not have any grandstands. We don't have bleachers. We don't have bathrooms. We don't have lights. We don't have a field right now because of everything that's been going on. We sit on the ground when we have one to watch our students. And if it's late, it's in the dark. So all we're asking is in the immediate future, finding a solution to address the lights. They're not that expensive. The investment in students and the student community directly impacts their learning. And I also think it's really important that we know that this was a heavy lift, getting the turf in, track in, the lease. And we are so grateful and appreciative to all of you that worked really hard on it. And everyone's really excited every day when we drive by and we see the turf going in. The fact that it's even going to say Grant on it is a miracle in and of itself. So we really do want to thank all of you and just instill that sense of urgency. We understand that there's planning that has to happen for a bigger build out. And it probably, I hate to say it, it probably will require the bond, but if we can peel off the lights as a separate conversation, we feel that a lot of, immediate damage to students can be mitigated. So that's all.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I got a question, Gary, for probably the two of those ladies. They may have more information, or even Dan. And this is just a curiosity question, and hopefully it's been taken care of. I know that back when they were originally talking about it, some of the grant community had talked about they didn't want lights or they were going to sue. They were going to be suing. And then I believe that went away. Like, that's no longer an issue. But has that been confirmed that that's no longer an issue? Because I think that was something that it came up because everybody was like, no, we don't want these lights. They're going to be pointing at our house. And then something was done that said they would be directional. So I just want to know if that was resolved for sure.
You want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that you might know the answer to it.
Great question. And yes, it has been. We have been in regular we've been in regular contact with the Grant Neighborhood Association, and technology has come a long way since, God, I don't know how long ago, was it 13 years?
It was a while ago.
We had this conversation, it was a long time ago. And no, we've been really thrilled to say that we've had support. We're not anticipating any roadblocks with the lights at this point anymore.
Okay.
So yeah, like I said, we're in regular contact with them. We all live in the neighborhood.
I totally understand that. That's why it was such a big deal then, because it was the community that was saying, we absolutely don't want this and we will sue you if you try to make us take it.
It was a couple people, and we actually did our own survey when we were actually starting to initiate this advocacy to make sure that we had community support, so we weren't wasting our time. And we had over 1,000 responses, and it was it's over 95% of the community supported the installation of lights. It's there's a real groundswell of support right now, and everybody's actually really excited about it. People love the bulb; they want to use it, and they want to use it, especially there is no time that they don't want to use it between games and after school and summer. It's a no-brainer.
It's the place to be.
We hope we'll see you there.
I'm up there all the time.
Well, first I want to say, I want to just thank the staff. I know they got into a hurry up offense to get the field installed. I really appreciate that. A lot of people said it couldn't be done, but you've done it. So thank you. Also for the many hours negotiating with the city to get us very close, hopefully to vote soon on a lease agreement. So I want to start with that. I know it was one of those things that kind of dropped in your lap. And you have really delivered it in a timely way. I wanted to ask a question about, I was looking through the summary of the staff memo, and I didn't see, what I'm looking at is a cost estimate for phase 2 that has all the high jump, shot put, javelin facility, field lighting, grandstand seating up to 1,500 with a price tag of 11 million. And I'm wondering, since the ask was for the immediate ask was for the lights, is there a separate cost estimate to activate the lights?
Yeah, I don't, but Virginia is saying yes. I don't know offhand, so her
There-
call might be better. We would have to take a
There's
look.
an existing breakdown
Yeah.
of all, like, there's a line item breakdown of that $11 million. And obviously it's a couple years old at this point, but I feel like the number was 400,000 for the lights at the time, and they're already partially in. So it's not, I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, but it's not, millions and millions of dollars to get those lights in.
So I'd like to
An
ask.
updated cost estimate, because I think they're going to be, obviously the lights themselves are a cost, but then there's all the other stuff that kind of goes on top of that, that's part of the project. And I think it'd be valuable for us to do our research and really understand, while the poles themselves are multi-directional, we want to make sure that the lighting pattern is appropriate for the field, because it's really important that we have the light set up in certain ways to ensure athlete safety, so that there's not shadow areas and things like that. So that lighting design piece is actually, it's fairly important. So I think there's probably a little more work to be done. It's certainly work to do.
Director Hollins, could I ask staff or to come back at the next meeting with a refined estimate? I appreciate, Marina, the issues you're raising, and it would be good also, because we got just a very large number, which is not what the ask is. It would be good to understand exactly what the size of the ask is. So if we could have that at the next meeting, Chair Hollins, I'd appreciate if we could get that. The other question I had, this is a more general question. And Dan, I think you would know this. In our agreement with parks, when the field is used by people who pay fees, who gets that money, or is that not the model anymore?
The draft lease agreement is that PPS controls all permitting and receives all fees.
And is that the case for our other fields, that in any time there's permitting, that's not that Parks now is doing I know, like with our gyms, that there's a different arrangement, but if we're doing the permitting fees also come to us, and I'm curious where that money goes.
I'll let Dan White answer.
Sure. It goes to the general fund. The idea is that it helps support the money that goes back into maintenance for our buildings.
So, just for what it's worth, when we set up the 10 Fields project, which was the first, when all the fields except for all the fields and all the tracks, with the exception of Benson, were redone in a partnership with Nike, the city, and others, that the thought was those fees would be partially also part of the ongoing sustaining the athletic facilities. And so it sounds like maybe that practice has changed, but it seems like, again, is sort of mirroring, if we have assets that are generating revenue, to keep them, that revenue in the cycle of either upgrading or addressing maintenance issues for the facilities. Seems like
It isn't a separate account, so the way that the accounting works, it just goes in to the general fund, and you may remember rents also go in there, so sort of all that revenue from buildings or operations that we house the buildings, that was $2 million a year until just this year. And I think the district is committed to keeping it at least $1 million. Because, and that's because of, yeah, Terwilliger and, other places where we aren't renting out spaces much. So, but it goes into the general fund and then comes back to actually Lydia's department for maintenance.
It's not nearly enough to manage all of our renewal and replacement needs or deferred maintenance at all. I mean, it's not even close.
Yes. So just so I understand that, though, it does stay within the athletic maintenance.
CUB
Sphere?
revenue goes into a capital fund, and if I recall the memo correctly, the memo calls out capital fund, or it doesn't. But it goes into one of there's a handful of different capital funds, non-bond capital funds. Some are restricted, some are not. This goes into a capital fund. But as the memo calls out, like the grouping of the capital funds, as Dan just mentioned, those annual revenues have been dropping over the last number of years. So to answer your question, it goes back to the general fund, correct? It goes into a capital fund, so it's put towards capital uses, but it's lumped in with all other capital. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Non-athletic.
It could be non-athletic, yes.
Do we know how much it is?
Or CUB revenue?
No, the amount we get for the rentals of our gyms, our fields.
It's less than $1 million a year now, but the district capped that decrease it wouldn't go below $1 million. So that helps.
So we don't get all that money to our budget to do those repairs.
Oh, wait.
There isn't as much revenue as there used to be.
So in the memo on page 6, and Julia, just so you know, those page numbers are there for you. Okay.
Thank you. I'm scrolling right now to page 6. Thank you, Dan.
The top of page 6, Fund 445, that is the fund where CUB revenue goes into. But I think there's other things go in there too. So that's not just CUB.
So that's like. So that's like the capital asset fund. I forget there's some special name for it.
Yeah.
The power fund.
Yeah, there's a couple.
Yeah.
A lot of them are restricted, so they have to go to certain work.
So that's CUB. So that would be everything from somebody renting, a classroom or the library and to using the fields. Yep. It would be great to get that broken out just in terms of like effective use of our assets. I know originally when the fields were turfed and everything else, obviously the first use and highest use was to be for the school communities. But if there were revenues that was designed to be like, some of that should be coming back into like for the field refreshes and everything else.
If I may, if you look at the balance for 2023 and 2024, it's almost $1 million. So $1 million will not go very far at all. I mean, if we were to restrict that to a single type of project, we probably couldn't get anything done. So sometimes if we have things that come up that are immediate repairs, we have to get done that are capital in nature. We take from different accounts to be able to do those projects. And, we have athletic needs, we have roofs that are leaking, we have sewer lines that are broken, all those things.
Can I add something? Is that allowed?
Give me quick.
I promise. For when we were doing the research on the bowl, when we were doing the lease research, we did a public records request to find out how much the Grant Bowl itself generated in revenue and over 10 years, and it was over $300,000, which over the course of 10 years, it's not a ton, but it was definitely, I think the park said it was their most heavily used asset. So that there is definitely room for revenue potential there, like in terms of like talking about the cost of lights and the revenue in. It feels like it would definitely be a significant chunk of it if there was some sort of exception made for, it's kind of a unique facility.
I have a question. When we talk about the grant piece, so now that we took it over, have we have a estimated maintenance costs that we're anticipating to have to spend on that? Now that we have obtained that asset?
We don't quite yet. We haven't completely taken it over. We'll have some, a maintenance contract with the company that put the turf in. There's also a lot of grounds work that we're taking on in this lease as well. So the short answer is no, but we're getting there.
I would love to get that, to find out what that additional maintenance cost. I'm sure that's something we didn't anticipate.
We're meeting Friday.
Yeah,
We're meeting Friday with grounds. So.
Okay. So to kind of just wrap everything up here, I know Marina said that we need to look at getting a revised cost estimate for the lights, and we can at least start that process. You think you'll be able to have that by the next meeting, or do you need more time than that?
How detailed do you want that estimate to be?
As
Because
detailed
if
as
you
Julia's
get it by
gonna
the
want.
next meeting, it might be one of these. I mean, the more time we
Whatever
have
time
to-
you need, if
to
I'm
do
asking.
the right work, then the
Well, how much
more
time do you
accuracy we
need?
can bring to it.
How much time do you need?
I would propose that we can bring something back next time and we can give you a sense of the level of
range.
detail.
Yeah.
And we'll do it in-house, where we won't pay to have someone cost estimate it. So we'll be able to come back and give a better range of total project cost.
That you'll have
That'd
an
be my
order of
recommendation.
magnitude.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Any other questions, comments around that? Okay, we'll move to the next agenda item. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We have the presentation for Cleveland High School. Fanfare, everybody. Yay!
Which way to slide?
Slide in.
We'll move.
We'll move. We're very mobile.
We'll slide on down.
Chair got wheels.
Yeah, that's right. This is my workout.
In that case, I need to be doing
Since I'm not at the table, maybe.
We have two of our senior project managers here. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Eric Girding, Senior Project Manager with OSM on the Cleveland High School project.
I'm Donna Bizayo, Senior Project Manager for Ida B. Wells.
Okay, we'll get started with Cleveland. So we started our comprehensive This slide shows the number of meetings that we have and what the topic is of those meetings as far as introducing the process, creating vision and goals, talking about our EdSpec program for comprehensive high schools, and then getting into site analysis and options to consider for the modernization. Just one slight change to this. Our meeting last week on the 18th was rescheduled to tomorrow, so that hasn't occurred yet as far as our meeting number 4. But that's where we will be bringing some refined site options to the committee for their review and feedback as we are ultimately working toward a single option that we can recommend for approval. In addition, we've met with CHS staff and presented the same materials we're taking to the committee, to the staff, and as well as to community design workshops, which we had one in December. And then again, our one for last week, which was canceled for the ice, will be happening in a couple weeks and getting some more community involvement and participation.
Quick question, how was the, from the first community workshop, how did it go?
The first workshop was great. We had over 60 people from the community attend. And so a broad range from families with young students from the feeder schools to Cleveland alumni and parents. And in fact, as a side note, I'm a Cleveland High School graduate. And so I saw some parents of people I went to high school with that were there, were really interested in the process. So great cross section of the community. And moving forward, I mentioned the progress to date as far as our community engagement process. That's really kind of defining the schedule that we're working with our architecture and engineering team to develop the planning. Next steps, we're refining the design options, as I mentioned, and having additional meetings and workshops to get through that effort. The opportunities that we've had is really to increase our community involvement with reaching out to historically underserved communities to get their input as well. We're starting listening sessions that will be bringing in those community groups in addition to our committee work and workshop work. We do have some challenges, of course, with Cleveland. It's a very constrained site as far as just where the main building is across from the existing parking lot. So that just presents some challenges with the planning and design efforts. There is also a decision that needs to be made on whether or not we would keep or demolish the 1929 structure. It has a historic designation, which is at the sort of lowest significance of historic value according to the state, so it's not a landmark. But there's still implications either keeping it or not keeping it with the site design, and so we're continuing to get feedback from the community on that. And then, another challenge is improving student safety on Powell and 26th Avenue there, as we know that that's been a community concern for some time, and that's one of the things that we're tackling with the project team as well.
I'm just curious, so far with the community, what are their thoughts around tearing it down versus keeping the structure?
Well, there's kind of similar to the initial mass conceptual planning effort that was done back pre-pandemic, that there's kind of a split in the community. There are some folks that like the old building and want to keep the historic part. There are other members of the community and the school community that would rather see new construction and have more flexibility and perhaps efficiency with a new building. We're seeing kind of a split with that and hoping to get sort of closer to a decision, a recommendation that we can make.
I'm gonna just say I think our new high school spec should be brand new schools. Just put that out there.
Duly noted. Thank you.
I'm with it.
And this is just kind of a massing model, just looking at the two different options that keep the historic structure and build new structure around it. There's another option that looks at putting some of the school program on the existing parking lot across the street, which adds a little bit more complexity and requires Skybridge to create a safer crossing across 26th Avenue. And we're kind of bringing that back to feedback tomorrow night to get some input from the committee. And then this is kind of a massing diagram of those two different ideas as far as using one site or two sites, but this is all new construction. And this is where the old building is demolished. And again, looking at either using the one sort of 4+ acres that we have as one site, or expanding across the street onto the parking lot. And as you can imagine, expanding across the street on the parking lot, that option does have a higher cost and some additional trade-offs that we'll be getting feedback from the committee and at the workshop. That's it for my update, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Director Collins?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Great. First, I just thought I'd also give a shout out. I was at the community forum. It was really well attended by a pretty broad cross section. Also, staff was there. Although I know they have their own process. So it was great to see a really strong turnout, sort of multi-generational, as Eric mentioned. And I appreciate the attention to whether or not the building, whichever model, the direction you head in, that there's an attention to the safety of students. With my daughter went to Cleveland, and that whole 26 Powell is just sort of a nightmare watching students outside the school pretty much all day, whether it's before school, during lunchtime, or after school. So I really appreciate that attention to safety in addition to the structure and what's happening inside the building. A question I had about sort of the timeline. I know last year, because Cleveland has been in the queue since the 2011 bond that didn't pass, and then somehow they got back to the back end, that the last bond allocated funds for all this planning and design work, and the saying at the time was, it's going to be shovel ready when the next bond, the plans will be shovel ready when the next bond passes. And I'm curious whether that's the case, or there's something between this work and the bond passage.
So after the comprehensive plan effort is completed, and then of course submitted to the board for approval, there's funding in the current bond and the 2020 bond for design and planning, so the design effort can continue. But we have yet to, approved our architect team to continue design, and we're waiting on proposals for that work. But it's right now with the comprehensive planning effort, we're looking at the April board meeting is our target to bring that for approval, and then design would continue.
And then it would continue, and in theory, if there were another bond and it passed, the project would be ready to move ahead, versus having that kind of longer planning period that happened in 2017.
I think I understand your question is that after the comprehensive plan, if that's approved in, say, April, we will then move into schematic design. Bond passes, it will continue design. It'll be seamless.
Okay, I guess maybe let me ask a slightly different way. So in the 2012 and the 2017 bonds, it's like the bonds passed, and then really that incentive work happened, not with Lincoln, but in this case, there was an intentionality, since they were the last two high schools, to sort of front load it and to provide some resources before the actual bond, where the whole modernization costs were included. Will we have speeded up the process?
If both Wells and Cleveland in November 24 will be in design and will be preparing for submitting building permits. Land use will be in there somewhere. So yes, it would be fast. It'll be faster from the time of bond passage to into design and into construction.
And then I get my final question is, and I'm probably going to keep asking this, so I'm sorry, Eric and Dan, if you've heard it before, but just in light of both Benson and Jefferson, where whether it was design or something site specific, where ultimately the project costs were appearing that they were going to be greater than what had been the funds allocated in the bond. What sort of work are we doing now? What would be done between now and if we went in November 2024 to try and get a really accurate estimate of what the project cost would be so that you have that understanding in the bond of what the cost might actually be?
Well, currently our efforts, one of the advantages, I guess, of being later in the whole high school modernization plan is that we have then our previously completed projects that we can utilize that data. And so we have now real cost data from Lincoln and real cost data, from Benson and better cost data from Jefferson, so that we're looking at that as a broad scale to make sure that our budgets that we're developing for Wells and Cleveland are as well aligned to what we anticipate costs to be. And then, of course, having cost consultant professionals, providing, their cost models to us in that process. But you're right, there have been issues with budgets, and we're doing our best to not have that happen.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks. So we're gonna move over to Ida B. Wells.
Okay, Ida B. Wells. We've been on a very similar schedule as Cleveland with our outreach. All of our community engagement has been almost right in line and in step with theirs. We started in October with the planning committee meetings. We just had our most recent one on Monday this week on the 22nd. That was rescheduled because of the ice. And then our community design workshops have been going along the same as Cleveland's. Our next workshop will be February 3rd, which is a Saturday. We'd like to invite anybody to attend that. And then we've had stakeholder interviews with the same engagement consultant that Cleveland is using, and those have been ongoing, some one-on-one and small group interviews with students, staff, and so on. We've collected a lot of great information and feedback, have some really wonderful, interested community members that have brought just amazing input for us. Quickly, an existing site plan here to show the major elements, and on the right or the east side is the existing school footprint, which the building would be built somewhere on the site, as you will see in the next slides, and then the existing school will be demolished. So we have narrowed it down to two schemes. The first scheme shows the buildable area here on the south in the orange block, and then we would be, like I said, moving after the building is demolished on the east, then we'd be replacing those fields. And so in this case, the baseball field moves. And in both of our schemes, the pool remains where it is because the pool is not ours. It's not PPS's pool. It is Portland Park with that pool. So in this scheme, the track and field stays in the same location. And in the next scheme...
Is the track ours or the Portland Park and Rec too?
The track and field is ours, yes. Yes. So the property is ours, but Portland Park and Rec built the pools in 1956. They were renovated in 2004, and they manage and pay for the pool use. So that's how that works. And in this scheme, we've reoriented the track and field to what we know is a better orientation for trucks and fields for sun exposure, but also this does give some other advantages to how the building lays out, and it makes for a more welcoming approach from Capitol Highway, where the city buses and a lot of people arrive from that side of campus. But there's also a lot of people that arrive from the south side from Vermont Street. So the blue arrows represent pedestrian access. The red dashed line represents Southwest Trails for the city of Portland. That will be maintained and actually improved. And in this case, you can see where the baseball field and multi-use field would then be rebuilt new on the east side. And in summary, these plans are a little bit smaller, but they get a little bit more detailed. For both schemes, we're keeping the pool, as I mentioned. The big difference here is that track and field gets reoriented on scheme 2. In both schemes, there's brand new tennis courts in the lower right on the southeast corner of the property. Both schemes would have new baseball fields and multi-use field. And the softball field that's over by Reiki Elementary School, that would be improved in both of these schemes. And it is possible that we can take all the input that we've been gathering and that it wouldn't be exactly like this, but we'd come up with one plan that we go forward with that just takes the best elements of everything. So in the original plans, we had 3 completely different plans. We took the best of each and came out with these 2, and now we'll narrow this down to 1 to go forward with to the board in April. And that's the end of my slides, but I can certainly show more or answer any questions.
So on scheme two, I'm looking at the track. So with that, and I'm a track guy, so will that have enough space for like the discus, the shot put, javelin, and is the javelin going to be going on the field? Is that a turf field or a grass field?
It is a turf field, and it would be all the typical things that you mentioned. In addition, the layout here works well because the topography of this site is higher to the east or to the right, and it drops down to the left to the west. So we would take advantage of that topography, and that grandstand would sit essentially in the hillside there, here between the building to the track and field. We also would be planning, from what we've heard, to make sure that there's plenty of other spaces here for queuing up crowds and setting up track teams and things like that. So while this isn't as detailed, we've just started to go into some more detailed drawings.
Yeah, that's my own personal thing. Just make sure we pay attention to our doors too.
To our what?
Doors, when we talk about our fields, a lot of times our doors gets left out or they got to go throw somewhere else.
Okay.
So I'm just saying my daughter, she's a door. So.
Okay.
We spend a lot of
No
time
bias, Jerry. No bias.
we spend a lot of time going off area where everybody is at. So if we can look at, U of O has a great field, utilization of for doors and stuff. So that's just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, thoughts?
Are all of the meetings being held at Ida B. Wells?
Yes.
I'm thinking about that February 3rd meeting, if I'd like to show up.
Yes, please do, and that will be at the school.
Can we make sure we get an invitation?
Yes, and that invitation was just sent out, and we'll make sure to keep sending those out to everyone. Ida B. Wells, lunch is served at 12:30, and the meeting is from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Cleveland's meeting is that same day in the morning.
Okay.
So Cleveland is in the morning at Cleveland,
Yes.
and then you have Ida B. Wells. So I could essentially make a whole day of just going to these.
You can join us. We're going to do the same.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
This is just a question about for both the schools, just in light of the conversation earlier. What type of stadium is being put in for both of these schools? I think currently, they both have just visiting or home grandstands, or not something on the other side.
Currently,
There's something on the other side that's small.
Visitor stands on the south end right here, and a concrete grandstand structure here, which is still being studied to determine if we might be able to just renovate that or if it should be replaced. So all of that is still under study.
And Cleveland, I think, has it's a super lame visitors. I think it's just a temporary rollout one. Is that going to be modified, or is there? I guess maybe my bigger question is there an ed spec around what we do on the stadiums?
Well, the ed spec is not very detailed regarding this stadiums. It does call for stadium seating. And, you know, that's something that we'll get into more detail when we're getting into schematic design about what can work within the site plan that moves forward. And there's certainly a difference between existing grandstands, say at Wells, versus new grandstands. The grandstands at Cleveland are somewhat newer, and that was a community effort to build those. But you're right, the visitor stands are just kind of some little dinky stands on the other side of the field. But we'll be in, you know, additional conversations with athletics about that as we move forward.
I've got
I'm just thinking
question as well.
Hold on.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say just listening to all the conversations, and I know that every school community has their own thing that they don't have that everybody else has. And as our ed specs have evolved, is just getting some sort of standardization, I think would, and I know each site is unique, but it would help with people feeling that there's equity of like the basics that we do at every school in the outside environment within the custom and the footprint of the actual site.
Director Green, do you have something to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, just a note. Because I'm not seeing the entire thing, but when we start thinking about athletics, the gyms, like, so when they're most of our schools are now getting at least 2 gyms. The main gym that has several, you're able to do 2 gyms and the main gym plus an auxiliary gym. And we're doing that so that we can go back to having 2 games, you know, like playing at one time. The problem that we ran into at Roosevelt is that in order to have 2 full games and it be a official game, you have to have proper seating for at least, and Dan may know, but you have to have seating for at least 100 people and a score table. And so, and without it being on the floor, and because we moved Roosevelt's gym in, that wall in, I believe it was what, 25 feet, Dan? It's 25 feet.
I'll take your word
shorter.
For it.
25 feet shorter than what it should have been. We weren't able to get the specs right when it came to the gym, and therefore their bleachers can't come all the way out without being in the actual floor. They can only come part way out, and they don't have adequate seating in the auxiliary gym. And you can't, I mean, they may have a clock, but you can't put a score table out there without it impeding upon the floor. So as we start looking at our other schools, I think we want to keep that kind of stuff in mind. We also want to think about if they've got a wrestling team, are we making sure that the community understands that if there's going to be shared space situations where, in Roosevelt's case, the wrestling team puts their mat on the gym floor and it takes up space so that the basketball players can't do what they need to do because the wrestling mat is there. And we also have the baseball team that hits balls in the auxiliary gym so I just think we need to be making sure that even if those communities are saying, no, we don't care about those things, that we're at least putting those things out there as things that they need to be aware of, because they do come up when you start thinking about competition sports. So I was just highly involved with Roosevelt. I'm not as involved with some of these other schools. So I know all the shortcomings and where all the bones are buried at Roosevelt. But I don't know.
So we know just do everything opposite of Roosevelt and we should be good.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
All right. The last thing I'm gonna say, and then we can adjourn, is that I would love for us to think about, or at least put in for a conceptual drawing of a covered stadium or area for the outside. That's just my own.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree with you.
Big money, Gary. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Well, it's just
Yeah, we need at least some kind of cover for, on one of the schools or something. I mean, we can figure out, we'll figure out something, but it would be nice to have some covered space, especially when you have football games, track meets, and Oregon, it's raining, and it just makes it for a better experience if our kids can have something that's covered at least partially, so they can have an enjoyable experience. And with that,
Well, also I'm just gonna like join in because you can't just say that. Throw that out there because for 15
Right?
years I sat in the rain and watched my kids play sports in the PIL, and
Yeah.
like it really makes it hard for a lot of people that grandparents and everybody else to come out and sit in the rain because like frankly the outdoor seasons usually are raining.
yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Meeting is adjourned, 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.